Welcome viewers to this series of lectures on early Indian economy, and in the previous interaction that I had with you, we spoke about different stages of early Indian history in terms of economy, and we had covered the timeline say up to 6th century BCE, which is just about the end of the later Vedic period, and from there on the economic profile, particularly in the middle Gangetic plain, registers a phenomenal change, and that is exactly what we are talking about in this two lecture series. The first one, we spoke about what are the high points of 6th century BCE or middle of the first millennium BCE, features with reference to geography of North India. What are the new findings, how urbanization is there to be seen, how alongside painted graveware pottery we have northern black polished ware, which happens to be a deluxe pottery, which is symptomatic of some kind of a material prosperity happening in the middle Gangetic plain, its radiation to several other areas outside the middle Gangetic plain, well into the upper Gangetic plain and also in the Malwa area. We talked about those sites. And we also spoke about some of the historians, particularly R. Sharma, who invests a lot of energy in projecting the advent of iron technology being very critical to this entire series of change with reference to capacity building of economy in terms of agricultural output. He talks about transplantation of rice as a new technique developed around this period of time, leading to increased acreage. And this, he says, is at the root of mushrooming of towns and habitation sites, hinterland, expanding agrarian frontiers that we get to see in 6th century BC middle Gangetic plain. Now, we were talking about this, and we shall continue from here. We were talking about that while the early Pali texts and several other texts also speak a lot about iron technology, usage of iron, and so forth. But in the archaeological profile of the middle Gangetic plain, in the archaeological findings of the middle Gangetic plain, we don't have very many evidence of iron plowshare. So, what is the extent to which iron technology was used in the process of production, agriculture, and so forth becomes a question mark amongst historians. And there are several other historians who rather talk about the criticality of several other things. For example, the social organization itself, emergence of the household family as a unit of production, grihastha, gahapatis, and so forth. Several other issues, they are social and political in nature, as being equally critical to this. But as in history, generally the entry point for a good understanding happens to be these debates, and through the intricacies of that debate we tend to understand the finer points of the time. So, it is with this intent that we are using this iron-based production labeling to understand what is happening in 6th century BC North India. This is not to commit oneself to the factitude of this assertion or appropriateness of this assertion. So, we were talking about that if this is the scenario, if there are a lot of towns, if there is a lot of hinterland, which is a must for sustenance of these towns, then forest clearance must have required iron implements alongside the conventional practice of setting the forest on fire to make it fit for cultivation. Buddhist texts also talk of iron plowshare. but as we discussed that archaeologically we have very few such examples, solitary ones coming from Kaushambi, Vaishali, etc. Now, historians say those who support this Iron Revolution assertion around 6th century BC, Middle Gangetic Plain, they say that look, the climatic condition, the soil typology of Middle Gangetic Plain is not suitable for long time preservation of iron artifact. The alkaline nature of the soil leads to easy corrosion, rusting of iron artifacts over a long period of time. So what we get in archaeological excavation, there is very little chance of those artifacts being preserved. This is quite unlike the dry soil of the Upper Gangetic Basin or Malwa area and so forth, Rajasthan area, from where it's more likely that these iron implements would have been preserved naturally, given the soil typology, less rainfall and so forth. And so that could have led to increased instance of archaeological findings of iron implements from other areas as compared to the Middle Gangetic Plain. They also say that this area, and if you are today trying to chance upon iron plowshare as archaeological findings, then the archaeologists would have to carry out rural archaeology, whereas most of the archaeological excavations, given the constraints of infrastructure and so forth, and the professional archaeologists, they generally set their camps near some urban site, and rural archaeology hasn't picked up in that fashion, and therefore if you are not doing rural archaeology, how can you chance upon finding iron plowshare, because that's where iron plowshare is being used. Iron plowshares are not being used in the urban setting. So these are some of the arguments furnished by the supporters of Iron Revolution in 6th century BC, Middle Gangetic Plain. Some iron artifacts, of course, are found from Banaras, and they contain same impurities as iron ores of Singhbhum and Mayurbhanj. Remember, why we are talking about this is because Singhbhum and Mayurbhanj, which earlier was part of South Bihar, now, of course, Jharkhand, they are known to be very rich source of iron ore and also good quality timber. The forest around Gaya and Rajgir, etc., they are good source of timber to generate that much of temperature, the pyrotechnology, which is a must for iron smelting. So they can attain temperature, say, up to 1200 degrees Celsius or 1300 degrees, 1400 degrees Celsius, in the absence of which good quality iron could not have been made. So the closeness of Magad area to the South Bihar rich source of iron ore, and the possibility of iron ore being extracted from here and used in Middle Gangetic Plain, that is why we are talking about it. And it is said that these impurities being similar, quite possible that people in the Middle Gangetic Plain had started to extract iron ore from the Jharkhand area, which is to the south of Rajgir or Gaya area and so forth. Also critical to the iron production, good quality iron production, is use of bellows. So that lets you supply oxygen for good combustion. And iron ore extraction, of course, is better than that of copper ore. So if you have, say, 100 kg of iron ore and you have 100 kg of copper ore, then if you have been using bellows for iron production and so forth, maybe that you end up getting 60 to 70 kg of iron from that 100 kg of iron ore, whereas for copper it could be just 1. So the advantage of iron technology is manifold as compared to copper. It's not only the hardness or greater hardness of iron, it is also the democratic nature of iron ore, which is ubiquitously present in the Mother Earth and almost everywhere. So for iron production, you can just chance upon a local source and start producing. This is quite unlike copper, where the natural sources of copper, they are not as ubiquitously distributed over the planet as is iron ore. Another critical factor leading to this Middle Gangetic Plain being thrown into prominence in material terms is the coming of the Shali rice, and which is a different kind of rice in the sense that it is transplanted rice. Its acreage is more, it can be grown even in the wet season, and so forth. Similarly, sugarcane also required deep plowing, and deep plowing, as we said, owing to the nature of the soil in the Middle Gangetic Plain and also the crops that are grown, they would have necessitated sharpened plowshare, and therefore they must have been used, because we have the product, we have the references, we don't have the critical archaeological specimen to justify it, and that's why there is an overriding evidence in literary terms and so forth, and perhaps it becomes very natural that it must have been there, and they are not there because of the climatic reason, because of the soil typology, excessive rainfall and so forth, preservation issues, etc. Panini also Panini belongs to 6th century BC, 5th century BC, and he refers to several fields that were plowed twice or even thrice. Transplantation of paddy, as we just discussed in the previous lecture, that from here on paddy becomes even a winter crop, and there is enhanced acreage of wet paddy. It can sustain more number of people, which has become a possibility, and that's why you find a lot of towns, a lot of settlements in the Middle Gangetic Valley around the middle of the first millennium BC. Around 60 towns are mentioned. If you look at it from pan-India perspective, then at this point of time, around the middle of the first millennium BC, the number of towns certainly increases, and that also tells you about the concomitant increase in the areas that serve as rural hinterland of these towns. Jatak stories, which again belongs to this period, coming from Buddhist tradition, speaks of 2-inched sheath of iron around the wheels, and this is something that you can see if you go to the rural areas in the Middle Gangetic plains. Even today, the bullock cart wheels will have that iron rim studded around it. It gives longevity to the wheels, wooden wheels, and makes it more sturdy. So this is with reference to enhanced transportation and communication, which again is a must given the urban nature of the settlement, given trade and commerce is doing very well along the Uttarapath and Dakshinapath, which were the trade routes. So all these things do add up to make this narrative. Greek sources, contemporary Greek sources, also allude to iron-tipped arrows used by Indian soldiers. Excellent quality of iron swords is spoken of in the Greek literature, contemporary Greek literature. So it is presumed that trade in Indian iron had commenced by around 4th century BCE, and iron production in the Middle Gangetic region had acquired that level, degree, and status and usage, of course. So this is what is hinted with reference to all these evidence that we are talking of. Now, alongside this, in the realm of economy, literary references pertaining to trade, commerce, there is the softer side of it, heterodox ideology. When I say heterodox ideology, think of Buddhism, think of Jainism, think of Ajivika sects, and so forth. Now, they also mushroom, they also come up in a big way around this time, and again the epicenter, the nuclear area of the emergence of these ideologies happen to be the Middle Gangetic Plain, the eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar area. And they emphasize a lot on non-injury to living beings, non-killing, and so forth. Remember, the backdrop is the sacrificial rites and rituals in Vedic sacrifices and so forth. So a practice that is born of, say, the Rigvedic period now is perhaps acquiring orthodox overtone and a new set of ideas, religion and religiosity, sensibilities, morality, ethics. They are coming up from different quarters in the Middle Gangetic Plain, and this is emphasizing a lot on cattle wealth and you can say criticality of cattle wealth. For example, if you look at the Sutta Nipat, which is a Buddhist text belonging to this period, it says that cattle constitutes the source of grain, strength, beauty, happiness, and therefore they should not be slaughtered. Right? Even the Brahmanical law books, say Bodhayan, which again is a 5th century BCE text, Bodhayan also prescribes harsh penance for slaying of a cow that is milked. So it is in that stage of its life where it is milked, or even a draught ox, because they find usage in the agrarian economy of the period, and it is the agrarian economy which is holding the society together. It is the base over which the entire social and religious paraphernalia and also economies, trade and commerce is existing. So that perhaps also is buttressing several other changes that are happening in the Middle Gangetic Plain, because these heterodox ideas are also coming in this area only around this period of time. Of course, subsequently it went on to expand, as did the agrarian frontiers, because another feature of 6th century BCE is that from 6th century down to the beginning of the Mauryan Empire or Mauryan rule, agrarian frontiers are expanding. Lawgivers speak of kings who could now injure trees that bear fruits of flower, provided they are doing it to extend cultivation and perform sacrifices. So that sanction against forests and injury to trees and fruit bearing trees, etc., is being little relaxed, because agriculture is at premium, and agriculture is the new way of life, and it is fast assuming the center stage so far as economic activities are concerned. We have reference to creation of plots of 500 to 1000 krishas, which is a unit of measurement of land, it seems, cultivated by slaves and hired laborers, emergence of new institutions, socio-economic institutions like that of the Gahapatis or the Kutumbikas. Now, Gahapatis can be translated into peasant proprietors or householders, to be more precise. And so it is one household, and one household would have one head and several other kin group living in that household. and the head is called Gahpatis, who otherwise are referred to as rich people. They are also engaging in trade and commerce. They have money, they have financial muscle, but they are peasants too. They are holding land over which cultivation happens. So are the Kutumbikas, who are also referred to as the well-to-do peasants. So these new social groups are now very much seen in the contemporary sources to be present. Bodhayan, as I said, is a 5th century BC text, perhaps hints towards what could be an ideal economic holding necessary to support a family, and that perhaps was something that measured 6 nivartanas. Again, this is a unit of land measurement perhaps, and that perhaps could indicate a little bit about the average size of land holding, although these are very less kind of a data to work out average land size or land holding. Nevertheless, this is what we have as source. Panini also refers to several what could have been royal officials, Kshetrakaras, what in Pali texts or Buddhist texts are referred to as Raju Gahaka, Amatyas of Buddhist sources, who have something to do with land survey, or maybe they are royal officials. Tax rate could have varied from 1/6 to 1/12 of the produce, because Shadbhag conventionally in the early Indian sources, law sources, are referred to as the desired level of taxation. Then, despite land revenue assignments to Brahmanas, please remember that kings and the likes of the kings could donate land assignments or revenue assignments to Brahmins, and they were exempt from paying revenue to the state in the name of doing priestly works and so forth, or taking care of education of people, of children and so forth. So that practice is there, but don't you confuse this with this practice the way it operated subsequently, say in the post-Gupta period. Because there existed no class of intermediaries between the king and the farmers, and certainly if you look at the propensity with which land could be sold, then there are obvious speed breakers. There also lingered a definite anti-alienating and communal feeling, which is redolent of old tribal ways, which did not allow free and easy disposal of land by way of sale, gift or mortgage. So the earlier practices of holding land collectively, that also did cast its shadow, inhibiting free sale and transfer of land, because now land had become valuable on account of agriculture, intensification of agriculture. Similarly, urbanization is also spoken of as yet another feature of this period. Jain canonical texts on town typology refers to scot-free town, a town with an earthen wall, a town with a small wall, an isolated town, a large town, a sea town, a capital town. So if you have this much of gradations of towns, you can as well make out that towns of varying shapes and sizes existed, and they existed in good number. 60 well-known towns, right from Champa in the east to the Bharikuch area, or Broch area as is subsequently called, in the west, Gujarat. So from Champa would be say Bhagalpur, the eastern part of Bihar, to Gujarat area in the west, and from Kaveri Pattanam in the south to Kapilavastu in the north. So if you scan this area around this period, around the middle of the first millennium BC, you have more than 60 towns that perhaps existed during this period, and these are old data. Now, as archaeologists are digging more towns could have come out, and this is not an updated list that I am referring to. So you have Champa, Rajgriha, Saket, Kaushambi, Banaras, Kushinagar. These 6 towns are mentioned as the scenic backdrop in the passing away of the Buddha himself. And remember, Patliputra is not here because Patliputra emerged little late into prominence as an important city in 6th century BC. Towards the end of 6th century BC, Patliputra emerges as a very important town. In fact, the metropolitan town subsequently going on to become the capital of the Mauryas as well. Many of these towns owed its importance to arts and crafts, and conventionally 18 guilds are spoken of living in towns. Rajgriha area had 18 guilds of artisans and craftsmen, woodworkers, smiths, leather workers, painters. They are all referred to as part of shrenis or guilds. Then there are different categories. Some could have served as royal officials, or some could have just been social categories, which also had some pertinence to administration or royal supervision or whatever. So those are all listed on your slide. You can see settis, maybe that they handled trade and industry. Settis granted bhogagamas to the kings for their settis were granted bhogagamas by the kings for their upkeep. Because they are doing some work for supervision of trade, industry and so forth. Kings were required to take into account the laws of guilds, castes, regions while administering justice. Instances of guilds migrating to different area if compliance to king's orders became difficult are also there, and that tells you about the relative autonomy of guilds. Trade and manufacturing is also registering progress. We have cotton production, manufacturing near Banaras. Karwas of traders and merchants are referred to. Deployment of shore sighting birds to facilitate navigation. So there is access to sea also in the context of trade and commerce. Glass objects, semi-precious stones, northern black polished ware perhaps constituted the items of exchange in luxury trade. Money economy, as we discussed earlier, is doing very well. Punchmark coins are there. Money lending as a practice is there. Even the price of a dead mouse is stated in terms of money in some of the sources, and that tells you about the monetization of the economy during this period. So it is this level of monetization, it is this level of urbanization, it is this level of expansion in trade and also agriculture, intensification of agriculture, which is leading to this transformed scenario around the 6th century BC or around the middle of the first millennium BC till the beginning of the Mauryan period, which obviously constitutes yet another stage of economic development in early Indian history. Thank you.